mask. Thank you. Sorry about that. Saying it was nice to lose the mask. I was thinking down there a minute ago, it was the last international trip I actually took was 2 years ago here. And then shortly after that, I was getting ready to take another one, and they closed all the airspace, or, closed all the borders. So it's great to see everybody. It's good to be back talking safety again. The collaboration efforts over the past 2 years or so have been pretty decent as far as OEMs and stuff. Clement and I talk all the time, and we've all gotten used to doing virtual stuff. So this is actually a great opportunity to get back together. Everybody else kind of talked about what their products are doing, and that's what I talked about 2 years ago, but I kind of got asked to talk about design and manufacturing. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Tony Randall. I am the Senior Manager for Safety and Certification at Bell Helicopter. Been there about 11 years. Been in this role in one form or another, expanding and contracting that whole time. So I've had the opportunity to be around and meet most of you. So the purpose of today is not to give you a class. I'm going to assume that most of you know what SMS is kind of about, at least in the basics. A lot of people have aviation SMS. It's been regulatory for certain parts of the operational community for a long time. There are a large part of it that there is no requirement, though, so it's going to be new to some of you. And then what I want to talk about today is going to be design and manufacturing SMS. So that's kind of my purpose here today, is to inform you all about design and manufacturing SMS. Talk about current and upcoming rulemaking activity. Talk about some of the acceptable standards that are out there that you can design to build your SMS to. And to do that, I'm going to talk about how Bell did their development and implementation of this whole process. Okay, I don't expect you to read all the words. So we first started this, I started in 2011, and at that time there was a FAA voluntary program underway, which then ended up getting canceled a couple years later. So quite honestly, we've been looking at design and manufacturing SMS for a long time, but there was a couple of false starts in there. We finally did kick it off in earnest around 2015. Got buy-in from the company, and you need that at a company level. You can't, this is not somebody's part-time job, this is a full-time job for somebody, and a couple somebody's probably, depending on how your organization and your company is structured. So we started that in 15, joined the FAA voluntary program, and then we gained our acceptance for our SMS from the FAA in March of 2018. We based our whole thing mostly on 14 CFR Part 5, and then built it to the National Aerospace Standard 9927, also known as the SMS practice for design and manufacturing. We did help develop that. We participated with AIA, FAA, and a couple other industry partners to help develop that NAS standard, and then the FAA recognized it. So currently there are 5 OEMs that have been recognized by the FAA. Give them a quick shout out. That's Bell, GE, Sikorsky, Boeing, Pratt & Whitney. And then there are 7 others that are in the program right now trying to get it. I do want to point out something on the slide. The middle box on the bottom, you will notice that the compliance assessments. So I've got different dates besides most of our locations. So a lot of the OEMs, people who, with either a production or a type certificate, have multiple locations, and some of them are international. And in the process recently, we've been talking to some of the larger ones at some of these industry gatherings, and there's certain groups that plan on doing implementation like we did there, location by location, and there's some that want to drop it in over the top of their whole enterprise all at one time. I will tell you that doing it, the implementation like that, where you step through it, and we did our Fort Worth facility first, which is our largest one, and then we did Amarillo, Ozark. Each of those they are in different states, some are in different countries. They have different rules, and they do different processes and procedures. Some of them work on military operations, some of them have flight operations in conjunction with, some of them don't. So that gave us the opportunity to flesh out our SMS and do a real good gap analysis on the base company in Fort Worth, which, oh, by the way, those Mother Bell Fort Worth policies and procedures are the overarching policies and procedures for the whole company, even though some of the smaller organizations might have others. That allowed us to look through all that. So it was a good way for us, one, to inform ourselves about SMS, to do a good gap analysis at each location, and then develop the SMS under the larger Bell SMS, which has its guidance material. We could morph it then to each location, and it also allowed us to do good training with each location. There was a lot of benefits to it, it's all I'm pointing out. So if you're going to go that route, it's something, if you want to talk about it more, I can at a different time. So anyway, and then on the bottom bullet there, Transport Canada actually has a voluntary program underway right now too, and we were accepted there for our Mirabel facility in fourth quarter of 2020. So how do you get there from here? So there's two standards out there right now that you can work in. Ours was structured around 14 CFR Part 5, but then when we did the implementation, we used the NAS 9927 to do the standard too. In 2016, the FAA recognized 9927 as an acceptable means of compliance. So SM001 was developed using 9927 as a standard. So if you're already using 9927, you should be pretty close to complying with 001. And it's been recognized by EASA, Transport Canada, ANAC, and the FAA as being acceptable means of implementation for the SMS. That document is currently being revised by an industry group, and there's another revision that's going to come out pretty soon, probably first quarter of next year. So I did kind of say at the beginning, I'm not here to give a class on SMS, but you can't really talk through all this without talking about some of the things that are important to it. So you're going to get some mother and apple pie stuff, so I apologize if it's a little redundant for some of you who've been doing this for a long time. So what is an SMS, right? So it ensures that an organization's product safety-related processes, procedures, and tools are effective and consistent across the enterprise. It's not a standalone system. It's a framework that ensures the gaps and existing practices are addressed. It ensures continuous improvement in an organization's SMS. It stresses risk-based thinking for an organization. It provides a safety risk management and safety risk assurance process. It's a good way to manage your organizational risk, and it promotes a positive safety culture. We will talk about just culture in a little bit, and that's something you'll probably take 2 or 3 runs at before you get it, a good model, and we did just that. And then the ultimate goal here is moving from being reactive to becoming proactive and eventually predictive in your product safety. This one's kind of interesting, and this is out of one of the other documents that's out there that you can read anywhere. But I like the part in the middle. Avoidance of damage to the environment and property is also a part of this. So it's kind of all tied into that, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. So I don't expect you to read this. In fact, don't read this. I threw this up because it's pulled out of the FAA rulemaking activity. But the black box on the bottom is the important part. And we're going to have a slide on timeliness here in a minute, but the rulemaking for the FAA, it's out there now, so it's got to be completed by 2023. And then if you're a certificate holder for the FAA, you got to have your SMS in place and approved by the FAA by February of 2025. And I think EASA is going to publish their rulemaking in quarter 21 of 22, and it's a 2-year turnaround on that too. So it should be quarter 1 of 2024 for EASA to have a mandatory SMS in place. Again, you can all read this, right? It's not too small. Kidding. So this is a big stars, a big arrow type slide. Top three green arrows are FAA. The bottom one is EASA. The fourth one down that's mostly yellow is Transport Canada. And then the second from the bottom is actually the consensus standard for international work. And then the red blocks, top one is the FAA's final rule. The bottom one is the EASA's SMS final rule. Next one up is the bilateral. And as a indicator, this is a 2018 to 2025 slide from your left to right. And that green line up the middle is where we are current day standard. The red line is where the SMS for FAA has to be in place, and you can back that off a year, and that's when your EASA timeline is going to be in place. So this stuff's coming up pretty quickly. Transport Canada and ANAC, as far as I know, have not started any rulemaking yet, so you may have a little bit more time there. And then the bilateral agreement should be done in like Q2 of 2023, and that's FAA, Transport Canada, EASA, ANAC, and the UK CAA. So that's a little bit of timeline for you, just to give you a heads up on what's going on. Back into the Bell portion of this. So this is the high-level systems description. Column 1 over there on your left, it talks about products, processes, and requirements, and you can just read straight across, and shows the operating environment. So in our design in SMS, it's designed in our systems description, discovers all phases of the life cycle. First phase is design and certification, begins at pre-design and continues until a type certificate or production certificate is issued and ensures product compliance. And as I'm reading that, you can just follow it down the block, right? Following the certification, it's a production phase, which begins with manufacture of the first production part and continues until production ceases. Safety management practices during this production phase ensure product conformity. And then the final phase is continued airworthiness. This phase begins when the first production aircraft is delivered and continues until type certificate or production certificate is retired, surrendered, or revoked. The final phase ensures continued operational safety. Keep in mind a system description is not only what's in it, but it's also what you leave out of it, and that helps you scope what your SMS covers to ensure that you're focused on product safety and not extraneous stuff that shouldn't be in there. Again, not a course, but you do have 4 pillars in SMS. This is pulled from 2 different places, but I'll go over them real quick. The 4 essential components to SMS come together in our requirements. So this model is based on both international and FAA guidelines. The safety policy in the upper left provides definition of the SMS and stresses a positive safety culture. The safety risk management, bottom left, introduces risk controls, and while safety assurance on the top right checks those controls and makes sure they're effective and working. And then safety promotion, which you see in the middle there, ties it all together and provides organizational learning and communications. Again, not something that I expect you to read. I'll kind of go around the outside with the red bullets, but this is a copy of the safety of our accountable executive's commitment that he actually signs. So the safety policy is actually the foundation of the organization's safety management system, and we put a lot of time into this. And when you look at the NAS and both the SM001, they put a lot of emphasis on this as well as being something that's very important to get right. So basically the accountable executive clearly stating that the organization's safety objective and sets forth policies, procedures, and organizational structure necessary to accomplish the objectives. The statement of the accountable executive clearly delineates management and employee responsibilities for ensuring product safety for our customers. It also makes a corporate commitment to just culture and encourage employees participating in this hazard identification and mitigation. Safety risk management. This was interesting when you start delving into this. You notice I'm reading a lot because there's some things I want to hit in here. So safety risk management, when we first dug into this, it was pretty interesting. We did a review of all our policies and procedures and all our different organizations and came out with 13, and we have a QMS, a certified QMS, and we've had it for years. But when we dug into this, we found 13 different risk cubes being utilized throughout the company. Some showed 1A as being catastrophic and happens all the time, and others showed 5E as the worst case. So, and then when we started looking into, okay, well, we've got all these, where's all the risks that we've identified through the years? So most of the associated risk analyses were housed in employees' laptop computers, network drives, and SharePoint sites. And they were done in Word files, Excel, spreadsheets, or some other old program that we may no longer use. There was no visibility across programs, locations, or functions, no standard defined risk matrices, and no central repository for managing and archiving safety risks. Sounds pretty bad, right? Depending on what portion of the company you went to. If you went to quality, they had a pretty good system, and you could follow it through. But when you went to a program, some program risk, they didn't have a good system. They might have had a good process in place, but they weren't using it correctly, so stuff was hidden here or there, and somebody leaves and their laptop gets wiped, and you just lost information, right? So we now utilize an internal SRM tool where we can manage, share, and archive both commercial and military risks. This provides a one-stop shop for all product and flight safety risks. By creating an automated and centralized risk registry, we're now providing a standard safety risk protocol for all programs and locations. All employees have access to this, which greatly enhances our ability to share across organizations and for people to go look stuff up on their own. And the repository part's pretty important, I think, because if you go back even 20 years in the company, it's hard. hard to find certain things that you might want. You got to know who to talk to. So when we put this all in one place and you train your employees on it, and it's the standards for quality for programs for whatever you're looking for, production, integrated operations, flight operations, it's all in one place. You can go look it up. So pretty beneficial. Safety assurance is the third pillar of SMS. Ensures the performance and effectiveness of safety risk controls and establishes and put in place under safety risk management. Safety assurance also designed to ensure that we meet or exceed our safety objectives through the collection, analysis, and assessment of data. And we actually had KPIs before. We fleshed the KPIs out, key performance indicators, a little bit better. And so we have a good set of key performance indicators, and we brief those quarterly up through the ELT level and talk about those with the biggest hazards and the biggest risks and what we're doing about them. Safety promotion. It's kind of an interesting thing. So it ultimately reflects the way safety is addressed in the workplace, regardless of whether it's in the boardroom or the shop floor. And I will tell you, the shop floor is the hardest place to get this done. I don't say that in the employees don't think you're safe, but they're so used to environmental health and safety coming around and doing near misses because they cut themselves on something that when a work process or a work process to make this widget is not right, and it hasn't been right for 10 years, but the two guys that trained them how to do it right, so they're still making it right, but then they get sick one day and somebody makes it and they don't make it right because they made it to the outdated policies or the process. That's where you got to talk to the employees, and you got to get them to report things like that. It may seem like a small thing until that one guy comes in and screws up 20 of these. And you're like, what's that have to do with safety? Well, if that makes it to an aircraft, that's not good, right? So that's one of the hardest things, is to ingrain into the employees on the ground floor and on the shop floor why it's important to report hazards. And by hazard, a hazard is also something like a work tool or a work process being out of date and not current. So we work on that all the time. It takes continual interaction. I will tell you, when we started our environmental health and safety journey with the near miss program years ago, which is environmental health and safety hazards, which is what I'm trying to do for product safety hazards, it's now well understood. You go talk to an employee down there, so if you have something like that in your kit bag already, you can go explain that this is very similar to the EHS near miss, but it has to do with product safety. So if you can get that key across, it's key, I think, but we spend a heck of a lot of time on the shop floor talking to people, trying to get them to make sure they report stuff. And the key to that, once they do start reporting, a huge key is to making sure that it's transparent. You have to have, actually going backwards a little bit, I got sidetracked off my notes, which those of you who heard me talk before know if I go down a rabbit hole, we're here for a while. But I won't get back to these. I'm just going to stick to this for a second. Because it is pretty important when an employee reports something, it's important, one thing, to have a confidential reporting tool, which actually is mandatory for most SMS programs, especially if they're regulated. You got to have that reporting tool. And the other thing, many things with it, but one of the other big things for the employees with that hazard reporting tool is a feedback method, and also to let them know that they're being heard and things are done, which that can do as well. So there's a lot of things that go into that. It seems pretty simple, but there's a lot of small things that can hamstring you, and it takes a lot of diligence to make sure that those things go forward. Because if they know that they have a good, if they have a good safety culture where the leadership and management will take their concerns seriously and not punish them for it right away, or not right away at all, which is a fine line. This is not saying you get out of jail free card if you were doing something malicious or you were doing something risk-based activity that you knew was risky. It's not get out of jail free card. Your same human HR policies and procedures still pertain. But what it is it's an opportunity for guys who made this thing wrong and go, why did I make that wrong? I made it to the rules. And they look at the rules, and the rules are wrong. And they go, that's why. So it's an opportunity for them to tell on themselves for making this wrong, but not get in trouble for it, right? I mean, they didn't know. So it's a big loop, and it's important that leadership and management understand that and are fair and have a just culture, which we'll get into it for a second. That will also lead to more reporting by your employees. Kind of rabbit holed that one. Like I said, I was trying not to do, but it's kind of important. It's one of the bigger things, is getting your employee base to buy into the reporting culture. Just culture matrix. So I just talked about just culture a little bit. For some of you, you might know it as just and fair. There are many of these. This one is ours. This is the third attempt at it, and we like this one. It's working pretty well. Some of you who've seen them before notice that there's usually 4 columns. We only have 3 on your left. That's because we took the culpability line out. We just had too many issues with it. We have a split workforce where some of them are covered and non-covered, or union and non-union. And so the HR policies and procedures on certain things are a little bit different. And it was causing heartache. So we took that out. We do have a good lead-in in the HR policy that takes us through this, and then that leads into whatever structure they fall under for human relations. If you want to find one of these, you can Google them. That's how we started. You can find multiple of these out there. Just go to Just Culture or Just and Fair, and they'll come up, and then you can make it your own. Let's see. So we implemented this Just Culture for dealing with product safety issues, whether they occur in the factory, the hangar, or the flight line, or the office. Any place human involvement might take a play in it. Practical application of a Just Culture requires a degree of sensitivity and discretion, but still ensures an impartial assessment of what are deemed acceptable and unacceptable actions. It is not intended to replace current disciplinary or administrative procedures, but instead to encourage a transparent and fair analysis of an individual's behavior. Our experience shows that alignment and harmonization with the HR department was a key component in successfully implementing the Just Culture. Our Just Culture is designed to enable Bell to identify effective interventions that help prevent or reduce events or near misses where humans and systems fail to perform in the manner accepted, to ensure that personal accountability is balanced with the desire for learning and improvement, and focuses on actions and intentions rather than consequences by offering a consistent and impartial approach. Yeah, I would say this is probably one of the better elements that we got out of this. You can have a Just Culture and not have an SMS, but you can't have a Just Culture, or you can't have an SMS and not a Just Culture. It's one of the prime players in the whole thing. So, if anybody wants to talk about that later, I'd be happy to talk about our experiences. So, this is my last slide. It's a kind of the process overview. It looks a little bit like a bow tie, doesn't it? It's that way on purpose. And you can see the good outcomes, bad outcomes, and the recovery barriers on your right. So it's a good metric, or it's a good visual that most people understand who are in this business because they've seen bow ties. So we basically developed our SMS to sit atop everything. I know it's a design and manufacturing SMS. I actually have the same policies, the same procedures, the same tools as they apply to SMS overarch the whole company, whether it's aviation production, EHS, it all falls in there. What we did when we wrote the policy, though, I have 2 policies. I have an aviation one, which does not fall under the FAA purview, and I have a design and manufacturing one, which does fall under the the FAA purview. The D&M one actually says in the policy document that we do have aviation, but it is outside the scope of the design and manufacturing SMS. I still use the same thing, same tools, same processes. Everything is exactly the same across the board. It's just that when I get audited, I have my tool sets are such, my data and my metrics are such that I can click a button and it takes all the aviation stuff out and just leaves everything that's auditable by the FAA for design and manufacturing. However, if I was ever to be mandated, or if we could pick up a Part 135 or something like that, I do have everything in place where I could pull the trigger and probably not even have to do a gap analysis, although I would do one because it should be there. But that's worked out very well for us because that means I have one set of standards for everything we do in the company. So the Bell Training Academy, when they're flying a training flight, they fall under all the SMS rules, just like somebody building my widget out on the floor. Or a quality person doing a root cause corrective action, that's all under there. So which kind of brings me to my last points here. So we did set this atop the whole organization, kind of like an umbrella. It provides common tools, ensures consistency across the enterprise, identify and manage organizational issues that could affect product safety, and monitor the health of the organization's safety culture and safety management system. To the extent possible, existing controls are being utilized. For those of you who haven't gotten into this yet in your organizations, if you look at the blue columns, the major systems components and the control systems, those are things you probably already have. I'm going to bet that if you're building stuff, you've got a quality management system, a QMS in place. It's probably already audited by somebody. You've probably already got a cost program. You've probably already got maintenance manuals. You've probably already got certification procedures. you probably already got 90% of what you need, if not more, for a SMS. You just need to you need to tie it all together with those things. When you do a gap analysis, it'll tell you what you need. So in closing, by 2025, most major international regulatory bodies will require implementation of design and manufacturing SMS for organizations that hold either a type certificate or a production certificate. So if you belong to one of the, if you fall under one of the regulators who are doing a voluntary program, it would benefit you probably to get into that program and start early rather than waiting for the regulation to come out. So I'm around. I've answered questions over the past couple of years. For those of you who know who Scott Harris is and you've worked with him, he's actually part of my team. And I can't remember who said it earlier, but safety is everybody's business. This may look like a manufacturing process, but this is actually safety. It's building safety into your products. So I'm more than happy to baseline anybody. With that, I think I'm done.